Preamble and public service announcement. Guys, I am not telling you to do this stuff right now. This is for a survival situation, hypothetically. In my experience, game wardens don't have much of a sense of humor. You could end up with a big fine, your firearms, your truck being confiscated, or worse. So, just putting that out there. What is going on, guys? Hunting today is mostly for sport. Kind of by definition, it is sport hunting, with a few exceptions. It is this way based largely on legislation. Not malum in se, but malum prohibitum. But what if it wasn't? What if we were actually hunting for food? Now, I don't want to confuse you. Yes, sport hunters, hopefully, we eat what we shoot. I hunt mostly for the meat. I have, unless my mom has some from when I was growing up, I have 0 antlers, 0 horns from anything I've ever killed. They're guided for. The meat is the trophy to me. But again, per legislation, I'm kind of constrained to sport hunting if I want to do it legally. But what if that wasn't the case? What if we were hunting for food? Let's put on our thought experiment caps here. That's what we're going to talk about today. Hunting for food versus hunting for sport. Welcome to the podcast, where hopefully we keep this subject and many others, God willing, in the future, discussed with God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm blessed to serve you as host, military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, shooting, but mostly today hunting background. A hunting background since I was very young, hunting. I've been blessed to hunt all over this wonderful country, from the southeast to Alaska, and my favorite place and where I reside on purpose, the Rocky Mountain West. I've also guided. I've also trapped. So there's the bona fides there. Now, let me talk about malum prohibitum and malum in se. Malum prohibitum is something that's evil by nature. Malum in se is something that the state, the government has deemed that you should not do because they do not like it. But nothing in the law of God prohibits it. These are not the same. They can go together or they can be completely separate. I'll give you one. Adultery. It's malum in se. It's evil by nature. God says you shall not commit adultery. Period. There's no clauses. There's no get out of jail free card. You shall not commit adultery. If you commit adultery, the penalty should be death. Per Almighty God. That doesn't change. Even if whatever, jurisdiction you live in, it's not against the law. It's still wrong. It's still evil. Even though the government may condone it or encourage it or promote it, it's still wrong. Let's look at malum prohibitum, a speed limit. There's nothing in the law of God that dictates any speed limits on the road. Now, you could obviously be reckless and endanger somebody's life, but we're just talking about a speed limit. For a long time in America, it was 55. And if you drove 75, you were breaking the law, malum prohibitum. But, a lot of places out west, we've got a speed limit of 80 miles an hour. Routinely on my way to work, 80 miles an hour speed limit. One day they decided it's okay to drive 80 miles an hour. The day before, you were breaking the law. The day after, you were fine. Nothing actually changed, just what the government deemed was okay for you to do. That's malum prohibitum. Sometimes it's both. Murder. Still, unless you're talking about the most innocent and among us, little babies, in murder, except for that, the government says is great and you should totally do it because it's horrible. I don't know, because they love child sacrifice. But except for that, in general, an adult, we say murder is wrong. That is malum in se. It's evil by nature, murder, and it's also against the law. Again, unless you're talking about little babies, in which case government's all for it. But why did I go on that long preamble to talk about all that? Because, again, per legislation in the vast majority of places, You have to hunt for sport. So let's put on our thinking caps. Let's do a thought experiment and say, what if one day the government didn't exist? There was no rule of law as far as the government goes. Well, that could happen, right? And also, let's just say, for a thought experiment, let's just say we entered a massive, Great Depression that made the actual Great Depression look like a day in the park, a walk in the park. Because, as bad as the Great Depression was, most people weren't starving to death en masse. People starved to death en masse in the 20th century in places like Europe. In the Ukraine, they starved to death. What if that were happening here and the government was like, you know what, we can't feed our people. We're going to just suspend all fish and game laws. We're going to suspend those except for endangered species. You still can't kill endangered species. You can't roast a bald eagle on your grill, not that you would want to. But you get what I'm saying. Anything besides endangered species, you can eat, you can hunt. No limits, no bag limits, no restriction limits. Let's put our thought experiment caps on and say this is the world that we are in now. How then would this differ? Well, let's start off with something, turkey hunting. Turkey hunting now it's become the new elk hunting. It's become the how much money can we spend? We get a specialty turkey shotgun with some Gucci camouflage pattern on it. And then we get some specialty turkey choke. And then we get some specialty $20 a round TSS heavy shot. And then we get a bunch of decoys. And then we got to get matching Gucci camouflage to match our matching Gucci camouflage shotgun, because you got to match, right? Or else you can't flex on Instagram. And you do all that to shoot a 20-pound bird. That's sport hunting. And if you want to do that, cool. Nothing wrong with that if that's how you want to spend your time. It's better than sitting inside and watching Netflix. But that's sport hunting. Well, it's a very common thing that most Americans have in America today. An AR-15, a 223. Now, the vast majority of places, you can't legally hunt deer, or you can't legally hunt turkey with a rifle. Why? Because it's easy. So what would you do if you were hunting for food? You would, an AR-15 would make a fine turkey hunting rifle from a practical standpoint. And you wouldn't try and call them in with your Gucci camouflage. You would wait till they roost at night. You would walk around with your basic AR-15 with a white light on it. You would shine it up in the trees. You would find the turkeys roosting, and then you shoot an entire flock of turkeys out of the tree at night with your flashlight. If you were hunting for food, because you're starving to death, not because you want to be cool in your Gucci camouflage and post on Instagram in your vintage Mossy Oak Bottomland shotgun matching shirt. Right? If you're hunting for food because you're starving to death, you would walk around at night with a flashlight and you would shoot turkeys out of the tree, a whole flock of them. Or at least you would shoot as many as you could eat before they went bad, depending on the weather. That is how you would hunt turkeys for food. Much in the same way, if you were hunting deer, and the rule of law didn't apply, or you were literally starving to death, when your families, people are getting raided, people are looting, you're probably not going to spend all day sitting on your butt in a deer stand. If you think that's what the apocalypse is going to be like, I got a rude awakening for you. Because all the rednecks that already know how to poach, those deer are mostly going to be gone before you ever see one in your deer stand, likely. Or maybe you'll shoot one and that's about it. Because the deer were driven largely extirpated, from their East Coast range during the Great Depression. And there was way less people on the East Coast during the Great Depression than there are now. Right now we hunt mature bucks, generally. Mature bucks for a few weeks to maybe, if it's a long season, a few months out of the year. If you're hunting for food, you're going to be shooting babies, you're going to be shooting mothers, you're going to be shooting whatever that you can eat because you're starving. And what you're probably going to do while there's still gas around and while there's still electric lights around, the average poacher in the South is going to tell you that you're just going to drive around the edge of a field at night with your light, with your headlights or a spotlight, and you're going to see eyes and you're going to shoot the deer. And you're going to shoot a bunch of them and salt them or hang them or smoke them or whatever you're going to do. That's how you would hunt deer if you were hunting for food, not for sport. That's what we do today. We sport hunt today. All the things of I'm going to get my sub-MOA rifle with my giant obese scope on it with a bunch of fidget spinners for men and my electronic rangefinder and my illuminated reticle and my super high BC bullets so I can drop a deer at 1,000 yards. Like, that's irrelevant for if you're hunting for food. 223 or a 22 Magnum or whatever is fine if you're spotlighting deer at night. Again, you're not trying to be sporting. You don't care. You are hungry and you're starving to death. So if you were hunting deer for food, that's what you would do. Or you would set up snares. You would go around a fence line very effectively, and you would set up wire snares to catch deer. You'd put some kind of like aluminum can with a rock or something in it so you could tell when something got caught in the trap. And you would wait till said deer got in the trap, and you would walk up and you would shoot it with whatever you had. And then you would have a deer. And you could do that while you were doing other stuff to protect your family or whatever else. You just set it up on a fence line, along a barbed wire fence, along a regular fence, along a route that deer naturally go into a bottleneck because they have to. And you set up snares. You would catch said deer and you would shoot that deer and you would eat said deer. That's how you would do it if you were doing it for food, not for sport. We don't care about sport. We're hunting for food. We're hunting for meat. Fishing. I didn't mention the Bible, but I've fished ever since I was young. I used to love fishing. I used to skip school and go fishing, and I love fishing, and I love sport fishing. I also, one of my early jobs was a commercial fisherman. My father's a commercial fisherman. His father before him was a commercial fisherman. I grew up on the water, on ships, commercial fishing. That's hunting for food. That's hunting for meat. That's not sport hunting. Now, likely you don't have a giant ship going out in the ocean and catching shark and a bunch of other stuff. But if we look at the same kind of concept, if you're fishing for food, you're not going to sit there with your fly fishing rod and your dry flies and all day on a creek. If that's what you think the apocalypse is going to be like, again, I'm here to burst your bubble because that's not really realistic. If you picture yourself as like a river runs through it and you got an AR-15 strapped to your back, that's a fantasy, right? That's like thinking women are going to throw themselves on you because you have a bug out bag. It's fantasy stuff. If you're fishing for food, you're going to make a trot line. You're going to make a trot line, which is basically what this is instead of like a line with a hook on it and you're throwing a lure. What this is just basically a really long line like you would do commercial fishing in the ocean, which is called long lining, but you just make a long line and you put a bunch of hooks on it with a bunch of bait on it. If 1 out of every 10 catches a fish in a day, sweet, because you got 100 hooks, so you got 10 fish, right? So you would long line or trot line. You would run a trot line. Something I did growing up. Some places this is actually still legal, but yeah, running a trot line. That's a way you would fish for food. Instead of worrying about catching a trophy fish, you'd probably be better off throwing minnow pots. If you know what a minnow pot is, you would just throw minnow pots in every ditch and every little pond, and you would catch minnows and you would eat minnows. Just like you eat sardines, because it's protein and it's easy to catch and it's calories. You don't care if it's a big fish, one big fish, or 20 little fish, right? Bull minnows are most places. They're easy to catch. They're nutritious, right? So that's how you would fish if you were fishing for food. You're not after the 25-pound largemouth bass. You're not after the 6-pound rainbow trout. You're after whatever you can eat. Also, things like cast netting. Cast netting is sometimes legal in some places for bait fish or whatever, but cast netting, going out at night, again with a light, even people were doing this even before electric lights, just like with a lamp or a lantern. Because fish are attracted to the light. You put a lantern on the front of your canoe or, just a pine pitch torch on the front of your canoe or kayak or whatever, and you throw out a cast net when the fish come to it, fishing for food. One of the things often overlooked is waterfowl. Waterfowl is a fantastic source of calories. This is one of the things most ridiculously regulated into sport hunting, in my opinion. Just in the government's eyes, an egregious crime if you take your regular pump shotgun that holds 5 rounds regularly, whether it's a 500 or 870. If you just have 5 rounds in your shotgun, oh, what an egregious abomination that is. But if you put a plug in it and it holds 3 rounds, now you're actually hunting. So obviously you take the plug out of your shotgun because it doesn't actually make any difference anyway. And nowadays the government says you shall not hunt ducks with lead shot. It'd just be horrible. You have to buy a shot that's way less effective, just way worse to hunt with, way harder on your shotgun. You have to use steel shot or really expensive Gucci shot, which, again, you're not concerned about if you're hunting for food. So you get rid of that stupid steel shot and you go back to real, lead. Also, nowadays it's sporting to shoot ducks on the wing, which is a lot of fun, shooting ducks and geese on the wing. But if you're hunting for food, you're not really concerned about that. You're probably, because, shells are important and valuable, you're probably going to wait till the ducks are on the water or nesting. You're going to shoot them then because it's a way more sure of a shot. You might even wait till there's a couple of them in a row, get your ducks in a row, and then blast them. So you can take several out with one shot. That's how you would hunt if you were hunting for food, for waterfowl. If you're talking about something plentiful like snow geese, you'd probably wait till it was dark and it was a full moon and you could just see them, wait till they're all nested down and crawl down on your stomach and shoot a bunch of them. As many as you could shoot before they went bad. Because ducks, waterfowl, geese, they're a wonderful source of fat. And a lot of people today don't want a lot of fat because they're worried about gaining weight or whatever. But fat is one of those things that's hard to get in true natural survival environments. Also, because you can get a lot more ammunition and store it a lot cheaper today, a lot of those things, waterfowl that you can't hunt with a rifle today, a 22 long rifle, great for ducks and geese and stuff like that as far as lethality. Again, now today, an egregious abomination if you shoot a duck with a 22 long rifle. But you can store a bucket, 1,500 rounds, or 1,000 rounds, or just a brick of 550 rounds of 22 long rifle is about the size of a box of 20, let's say 550 rounds of 22 is about the size of a box of 25 12-gauge shells. So think about that. If you're trying to store ammo, if you're going to store ammo for food, if you're going to hunt a bunch of waterfowl, if you're in one of the flyways, I love the shotgun, but if you're talking about long-term, hunting for food, you're probably going to shoot a lot of those ducks because again, you're going to wait till they land. You're not trying to shoot them out of the air. You're going to wait till they land and you're going to hunt ducks with the 22 or geese with a 22. And that's what you're going to do because that makes the most sense if you're hunting for food, not hunting for sport. Yeah, it's super fun to call geese down into decoys and shoot them out of the air. But it's probably not what you're doing if you're trying to survive. You're probably waiting till they land and you're going to shoot them with a 22 or get a couple in a row with a 12 gauge. So if you're hunting for food rather than for sport. So, just in closing, I love hunting and I love hunting for sport and I love the chase. I love hunting. I love stalking. I like, what I would call spot and stalk and still hunting because it's very challenging. I like archery hunting because it's challenging. I like archery hunting with a recurve bow because it's even more challenging. I love to hunt with a handgun. I've been blessed to take a lot of big game animals and small game animals with a handgun. Why? Because it's hard. Why? Because it's a challenge. Why? Because I like to challenge myself as a hunter. But if I'm starving to death, my wife is starving to death, right? I'm less concerned about that. So if we're putting on our thinking caps in this thought experiment and talking about hunting for food rather than hunting for sport, just realize that it's going to be a different kind of hunting if you're actually trying to survive. Now, a lot of you guys that are into hunting, you probably have a decent shotgun and you probably have a decent 22 or a couple of 22s. But for those guys that, live in the suburbs and, are just into the tactical stuff and, a bunch of the, gun tube glitterati guys with bald heads and beards and wearing black multicam, I'm a tactical guy. I'm currently employed as a private security contractor, military, law enforcement, very robust tactical background. But a lot of those guys, that tactics is all that they think about and all that they do. For those guys, and if you're influenced mostly by those guys, you may not have a good go-to 22 long rifle or a good go-to shotgun. But those, as far as guns go, are going to be your most valuable food-getting apparatuses as far as firearms go. So, if heretofore you've only been into Glock 19s and AR-15s, think about getting, a decent 22. I don't even care what it is. Ruger 1022, Ruger 1022 takedown, a Ruger 1022 stainless steel. Any 22 you want as long as it's a 1022. I'm just kidding. But that is kind of your go-to, right? 1022. But if it's a bolt action 22, whatever. But a good 22 with a good store of ammo, it's a good thing to think about having. And I know a lot of you guys already have that and I'm preaching to the choir. But some people, again, they may only be into Glock 19s. And in which case, my condolences. One day you'll actually probably shoot a real handgun. But you're probably just in a Glock 19. If you're just in a Glock 19s and, AR-15s and AR-10s and all the tactical stuff. I love that stuff too. But again, as far as like hunting for food, consider getting a 22 long rifle. Consider getting even if it's just a Maverick 88 cheap, affordable pump shotgun with a rib on it or even better sights on it. Something like that. Or just a basic shotgun with a basic array of shells with different shot sizes. Think about having that. Even if it's not what you're into day to day, think about having one, being semi-familiar with it. Because those are valuable meat-providing tools. With that, guys, whatever the laws of man are or are not, depending on the state of the government or the state of society, remember God's laws still apply. We are called to have dominion, right? We are called to have dominion over the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, right? We're also called to be good stewards. So just think about that. Tactical verse of the day. For an overseer, as God's steward, must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain, but hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. What a great verse. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.